Welcome to the Content Strategy Insights podcast, where accomplished content strategy experts share their wisdom with our friends in the content community. We talk with professionals who work across the span of content strategy, from small businesses to big enterprises, from content design to content marketing, from solo consultancies to huge agencies. Our mission is to democratize content strategy, to make its principles and practices accessible to everyone. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 39 of the Content Strategy Insights podcast. I'm really happy today to have with us Neal Sofian. Neal is the CEO of Tuzag, which is a really interesting company that helps folks do behavior change in the healthcare field. One of the online, I think the website says they do hyper-personalized content and interactive storytelling to promote health. Is that accurate, Neal?
Yeah, I think it might grow a little bit to, you'd almost say now it's conversational AI. It's, I guess I'd boil it down to conversation bots. How can you create infinite variations of content that are contextually relevant to just each person and turn that into a conversation and build a relationship with it?
That's golden in this day and age of
Yep.
like everybody wants engagement, and if you create a relationship, you get that. So, tell me a little bit about the technology and the like how you stitch that together, how you make these relevant, like kind of because this has to be a real conversation or something approximating a real conversation. Tell me a little bit about how you get to that point of being able to do that.
Well, I think there's three parts to it. One is technology. Two is behavior change, and three is compelling content. You need actually all three. So the first part was, and from our perspective, the technology was really just Dave Bolger, who's the founder of the company, saying, I wanted to do the other two, and the only way to do that at scale was to create some technology to help me. So it wasn't that he started with technology, he started with a communication problem, and then said, can I build technology that will help me solve that problem, which is infinite variation, that says people are unique, and that the nuance of communication is incredibly important, that knowing that you're a fisherman and I'm a baseball fan means how you talk to me in terms of the analogies of the metaphors might be different. And how do I account for each one of us? Or then the third person's a potter and the fourth person's a dancer and somebody's family oriented. All those things matter. So how do you actually then create variations of content so it will sing for each person? And so he started looking at that problem and said, so in essence, he had to create a technology that's more like Mad Libs. But it's a technology that says, if I build a profile on you, and then I build a generic form of content based upon that, and then essentially it's full of gaps and holes. And then that way, words within sentences, sentences within paragraphs, paragraphs within the whole body of what we send, all become on the fly, filled in with that profile appropriate to you. And then build that on a neural net such that it now begins to then say, let's look at, did the information I send you resonate, in a sense, because we're asking you to respond, because it is a conversation, or to do things, and how you respond, we can then begin to learn and say, do we need to get better, that actually saying things this way is more important than saying them that way, or this offer resonates with these kind of people who respond in that way.
Interesting. So when we talked before, it sounds like machine learning, what you just described.
I think it's called machine learning.
Gotcha.
And in fact, I would tell you it's more machine learning than it is true AI. A lot of people love to use AI, and I have to tell you, I'm a guy out there, talking to investors all the time. And if you don't use the two letters AI, then they just yawn. You got to say it. But everybody now says, what is AI? And I think some people describe almost anything that has an algorithm, they say it's AI. And I'd like to suggest that most of what we're doing is really much more focused on machine learning. We're building algorithms, and then we're going to learn from them, and then we're going to use those to get better. But I think that's much more ML than it is pure AI. Where AI is important for us is that if somebody else is producing AI around predicting who may get sick, who may have an issue, I want to absorb that AI from others so that I can use that to inform the content I should create for you. So I'm particularly happy to use other people's AI, and then I'm doing machine learning, and I'm also very much involved in natural language, processing to be able to convert what we're doing so that it can actually be, whether it's chat, whether it's voice, whatever it be.
Can you? I want to back up just a little
Yeah.
bit and have you talk a little bit about natural language processing,
Yes.
because it's something I think I have my head around, and I guess many of our listeners will. But I'd love you to.
It's like, how do I turn from language to text and text to language? And how do I make that work well? Now, again, I'm not the technology guy. I'm the public health guy who knows what I want it to do.
Right.
You probably will need to set up a separate podcast where you can talk to Dave, and he will get into long conversations with you about how to build this stuff. And before you know it, you'll have a conversation that will somehow involve Dungeons and Dragons. And how
Like all tech conversations.
Yes.
Yeah, ultimately come back to
And
that.
then you find out, of course, that the public health guys don't all play Dungeons and Dragons. We play other games.
Right.
So.
Well, that's it. Yeah, and I forgot to mention that about your background. You're a master's of public health.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the behavior change aspects of this is what drew you into the project and into this whole venture.
Yeah, so I'm public health, and I've always looked at how do you use behavior change and then technology. So the first big thing I was involved in was a thing called Free and Clear, which is a smoking cessation program, which is telephonic. And you go, well, that doesn't sound very exciting. But in 1986, it was
Kind
very
of
exciting.
Old school voice tree kind of thing.
Well, no, it was live coaching.
Oh, live actual
actually
people.
do live coaching
Okay.
on the phone. Was instead of having to go to a group, you got to talk to a coach on the phone. Well, that's like everyone goes, oh ho hum. 1986, that was a radical concept that needed to be proved, and it was a randomized clinical trial with the National Cancer Institute. And it was on the basis of that we started doing phone coaching. So that was the new technology of the day. My next conversations was really building social platforms around cancer or arthritis or end-of-life care. And it was like, how do you start connecting people contextually through other people like themselves, using social capital and profiles of saying, I am a woman, I am 35, I have breast cancer, I'm in recurrence, I'm still thinking of having children, I'd love to connect with other women like me or hear the content that those women created, and we made it sound like radio talk shows.
Interesting.
And so that was the new technology. So in that way you tailor people. This is now you tailor information so that it becomes very much more like people.
But that context is still what drives the ability to create that content.
Correct.
And we were talking before, it sounded almost like conventional, like demographic and psychographic kind of stuff. But you do a lot more, like you were just talking about relationships. And
I want to know things like, for example, there's a thing called the Vulnerability Index, which was created by Alexandra Drain and Wendy Lynch. Great research they were doing. And it looks at saying, what are the underlying behaviors that drive behavior change? So knowing about your energy, knowing about your sleep, knowing about your relationships. Are you a caregiver? How are your finances? Are you depressed? All those sorts of things are incredibly important in terms of understanding. If I want to, for example, get you to take your medications correctly, believe it or not, all those other things matter. It's also important to know what your values are. Are you family driven, relationship driven, career driven, spiritually driven? Most people don't care about their health, to be honest. So why would we keep telling people the reason they should make health changes is because it's good for them? It's much more important if I know that you're family driven to show you that from a value perspective, making this change somehow will help you meet your values. And then I probably want to, by understanding things like your hobbies and some of these other issues, I can then say, here's the language I should use to support that value. And then I want to then understand these other things like the vulnerability index to say, what are the enablers or disenablers of your behavior? So that way I might be able to offer you up things that might be surprising. So the solution to getting you to exercise, if I understand that you're also taking care of a mom and 3 kids and you're financially strapped, probably telling you should go do yoga is not the right solution. Helping you solve the problem of how do I manage my mom on limited budget and deal with the stress of that. I might go exercise if you help me with what's a problem for me. And so I need to both understand what's going on with you, I need to understand what you value, and I need to understand the context of what's a way to talk to you about it. And then based upon that, I can create content and offers that are meaningful to you.
Yeah, now tell me, so you talked about how you establish the context, how
Yep.
you kind of gather all that. Talked about just this sort of, I have this picture of the super Mad Libs, kind
Yeah.
of fill in the blank kind of
Yeah.
thing. There's the content that goes in that fills it. Is this, does it start with a database? Like in machine learning, I know you start with a learning set. Did you start with sort of a base level of like, if you want to help somebody quit smoking, here's what you tell them, or and then how do you mix that together with the contextual information?
I would say that the first thing you do, if you want to have a conversation, the best conversation people start by asking questions. They don't start by telling you anything. That
Yeah.
hi, nice to meet you. We have a cup of coffee. Tell me about yourself. I think that's the place you start, by asking. Let's get to know you, and then based upon as we get to know you, then I can connect you up to content that's meaningful to you. And I think I'm not trying to be the actual intervention. I'm the engagement layer. So I'm the concierge. The concierge doesn't need to be able to tell you everything on if you want to go to a Chinese restaurant, they don't need to know everything that goes on in the Chinese restaurant. They need to understand what you're looking for, that you're looking for casual dining, that you're looking for a place that's clean, that you're looking for a place that's authentic. I mean, take your pick. You want Szechuan, not Mandarin. And then they're going to say, "Oh, cool." And they want to walk no more than 10 minutes. Their job then is to say, "How do I solve that problem for you?" and send you to something that's meaningful to you. So in that case, I can do the same thing for smoking. I can then send you to the right service for you. I'm not trying to be all those services, so I don't have to create all the content that says, here's how to quit smoking, here's how to manage your stress, here's how to sleep better. There's 100,000 apps out there. There's people who devote their whole lives to each one of these topics, whether it's diabetes, sleep, stress, asthma, managing adherence, all those things. So really what we need to do is how do we connect people to use all those services? And so my content is really around the conversation, the engagement, and in essence, bad word, but it's the truth, the steerage.
Yeah, well, and sending them to the right place, and that seems super valuable in this information overloaded world. To be of service in that way is and I bet. Well, I want to quickly sidestep into the privacy around this. I know most of what you do happens in the medical world, so you have HIPAA protecting the whole shooting match and everything like that.
Yeah.
But what you're telling me just seems to have so much broader application in this modern world where everybody wants to engage and send people off, kind of help people make better decisions and find the right content. And you guys have figured out how to do that. I guess, so a couple things there. Is that true that HIPAA is sort of the guiding thing within the healthcare world? But have you looked outside of the healthcare world and figured out ways to...
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we're working in healthcare now because actually I don't know anything about fintech or, I have no competence there. But absolutely, this platform is applicable to any engagement. It's just at that level, it's technology, and behavior is behavior. And even when we're talking about an employer, I'm just as interested in helping an employer get their employees to sign up for a 401k and get a match, or find out that there's other educational opportunities for them as an employee. So even within the employer set, tied to, in a way, broad set of what is health and productivity, some of the things I might offer you may have nothing to do, maybe the mint. It might be something like that.
Yeah.
But it would work just as well in terms of helping you find a home. If you're in a market where you're buying or selling real estate, it could work for anything. In healthcare, HIPAA does make a difference. But I think sometimes we've spent a lot of time in healthcare thinking that HIPAA is simply a barrier. And I would tell you it's not a huge barrier. It means that you have to give control to the consumer. Mm-hmm. And the consumer gets to decide how much of the data that I might tailor on is available to me. That should be in their call. Do I have access to their medical record? That's their call. Do they want to answer questions for me? That's their call. Do they want to let me have their Fitbit data? That's their call. And they can turn it on and off as they please. And I think, so that's the first layer. And if you give them that, then everything they're offering is voluntary. And that gets you around a lot of the HIPAA issues. The second is you do have to be, if you're, for example, we're not just using tailoring in terms of chat, but some of it might be through your smart speaker, through an Alexa or Google Home, that there are certain things we will suggest not to do when it's voiced because other people might hear. So that way we'd say, hey, for this code, we have private polling and private questions go into the app and answer them there. So you can manage that stuff. I think that too often we've spent our careers being more concerned about HIPAA and that will legal sign off on what content we're creating. And we don't care whether or not the content we're creating is actually compelling or interesting or funny or amusing or engaging or contextually relevant. What we care about is that we turned legal into our customer and saying, as long as they can say, well, it's HIPAA compliant and yeah, nothing, we don't see anything that'll get us into trouble. But that misses the whole point of that's not engagement, that's compliance. And
Right.
we're about engagement, and I think that's why you can't allow, HIPAA has to be dealt with. You have to deal with it. You stay on the right side of the law all the time. You have to stay on the right side of legal. And at the same time, that's not an excuse for not creating compelling, interesting content. And what's wrong with assuming that the customer has control of their own data?
Yep.
I think that's not nearly as hard to do as we think.
In that sense, it seems like medical communicators like you are ahead of the game because, like, with the arrival of GDPR and just growing privacy and concerns among people, and so you're balancing this thing that everybody's challenged by right now. This need to be GDPR compliant, but still engage people. You're starting to crack that.
Well, yeah, and I think part of that is by asking, the way you engage people is asking questions that certainly in healthcare we haven't traditionally asked them. Mm-hmm. For example, not only are we asking kind of values and metaphors, but let's say we're having a conversation. What would you like the person you're having the conversation to be like? Do you want them to be more like your best friend? Do you want them to be like a drill sergeant? Do you want them to be like your mom? Do you want, so what we've created is a bot we call Jamie. And Jamie is intentionally gender fluid. It's a kind of, and Jamie can be male, can be female, can be kind of neither. And then not only can you set Jamie's personality into either mom, coach, mentor, drill sergeant, BFF, but then you can actually then up the scale of their vocabulary and their sense of charm and humor and their patience. And how straightforward do you want them to be with you? How funny do you want them to be with you? And if you create mom and then you up the humor and you lower the patience and you up the vocabulary, she stays on this side of blue, but she gets interesting with some of the things she says. So we can even tailor around personality type, because the nature of conversation is, it's like some people you like to talk to.
Yeah.
Some people you don't.
You're getting at one of the reasons I wanted to, just as quick background, I met Neal. We're in a place called Cambia Grove right now. It's a healthcare innovation center in Seattle. And it was a little bit of a stretch to bring Neal on, but I'm totally not regretting my decision to have you. This is all great stuff. But it was that sort of, I inferred from our conversation that things like this might come up. For example, what you just talked about raised issues of both like voice and tone, what we'd call in the content strategy profession, like a lot of places like MailChimp being the classic example of, like, when you're reading MailChimp copy and interacting with MailChimp, there's that voice and tone issue, but there's also like grammatical style and readability of content. And there's sort of a growing consensus among content strategists and content designers that you want to be like around the 7th grade level or something like that. But it seems but there are probably contexts where it makes sense to have a different voice and tone as you have with the different personas that you're serving up the content with. What about that level issue? Are some of these people more erudite and
and I think there are differences.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's and I don't have any evidence, this is not just me believing, this notion that we must always kind of look for this lowest level of vocabulary and content, I think is actually a little bit of a red herring. So, and the story was once told to me that I loved was, have you ever looked at, if you like to play the ponies, if you're a horse race, go look at a tote sheet. It's incredibly complicated. And you know what? The people who play the ponies tend to be historically more blue-collar, lower-educated people, but they're extraordinarily interested and engaged in the ponies, and therefore they read very complicated things. And so it's not just an issue of vocabulary, this notion that we have to either dumb down or dumb up. It's a matter of engage people and they will go deeper. Now that doesn't mean you need to use highfalutin words, so to speak, or lowfalutin words. I think it's a matter, but the notion that level, it's really, I think that's a misnomer in terms of thinking about what
and I
makes
wonder
sense.
if it's like a problem, like a relic of mass communication.
Yes.
That you have to play to that least common or
I
middle
think that's
denominator.
exactly right. If you work on the assumption that we can only write one thing, so we have to write it for everyone, hence, mass marketing is a relatively new phenomenon. It's a 20th century phenomenon, because if you really go back to early forms of marketing and communication, it was the snake oil guy who was standing on a wagon looking at each person in the eye selling literally snake oil in a bottle. And it's only when you get to the world of the madmen in the 1930s onward that you go into a mass communication strategy. Technology now lets you get back to essentially segments of one. And that means I can build stuff that's of interest and level and style for each individual person. And that's where we really need to go to. But don't just assume that just because I know your educational level, that speaks to the level of what the language should or shouldn't be. I think that's a real simplistic misnomer.
This circles right back to the context thing. You
Yes.
know that from all your context setting stuff.
Right.
Hey, I want to make sure we get to storytelling.
Okay.
Because you talk about that it's an important component of your engagement. Tell me how storytelling fits in with your engagement model.
Okay, so let me give you an example. I can give you a generic message that says, you need to exercise. Exercise is good for everyone. Exercising 3 days a week, for a minimum of 30 minutes is great for your health. That's a piece of information. What if all of a sudden I start knowing that the weather, let's say I know that you prefer a certain type of exercise. Let's say I know some psychodemographic data on you. Let's say I know that you're family-oriented versus relationship-oriented. Let's say I know you have a medical condition or not. If I know all those things, all of a sudden it goes, hey, it's 41 and raining. It's a great day to exercise inside, but you can tough it out. And what we just did was we just pulled an API because we know the weather, but we also know that the person is in Miami. So 41 and rainy means they think they're going to freeze to death. And so their message becomes 40. So now you're telling a little story. It's the weather outside is but then you say the exact same thing. It's 41 and rainy, and all of a sudden we're talking to the next guy, and we say, hey, it's 41 and rainy. It's a great day to go outside. Put your shorts on and let's go play with other people. Well, he's in Duluth, Minnesota. And so now we're telling the beginning of a story. And then we say, and because what she want to do? She wants to play golf. Okay, he wants to go hunting. So then now it's not exercise, it's hunting and golf. And she wants to do it with her friends, and she wants to take some strokes off her score, and he wants to go slay the beast. And she wants to do it with her friends, and he wants to do it with his family. And she wants to get some walking because we know that's her preferred exercise. So it's how do we get her going with that first? And we say for him, it's let's get to the gym and do some lifting to get you ready. And then we also say, and oh, by the way, he has metabolic syndrome. And so we want to say, but before you take off for the woods with your kids, why don't you check in with your doctor? Those became two stories. Just little micro stories, but they went from a message about exercise to a story about me and what I like to do with my friends or family and what I need to do before I do it. And then based on that, you not only have that little story, but then you pop up and she gets an ad for a discount at a golf tee and a discount at Walmart for walking shoes. He gets a discount at Cabela's and a connection to an agency, a thing called, in this case, Vim, which helps connect you to a doctor to make sure you have a doctor who can help deal with your metabolic syndrome. So it becomes a story with a payoff. Well, if you can do that by the millions, and you can, because essentially all those little things are just plugging in holes into that generic piece of content. So what you're creating is tiny little stories. And sometimes stories are very simple, but what they aren't is really about medical information. They're about a story. So maybe a simpler way, there's a narrative to it.
Yep.
There's a kind of, it's about me. There's some sort of initial issue, and there's a resolution. I mean, it's that's old-fashioned storytelling.
Yeah. But also, it's every communicator's dream to be able to speak directly to their audience and know their exact concerns. So.
Yeah, and some of that is using, and in our case, what we're doing is a mixture of thinking that through, what is the story we want to tell, and then it's what kind of third-party data can we get as well as first-party data. So if I can ask you if you're family-oriented, I can actually buy a psychographic profile on you. So that's third-party data. I can go to weather.com to get the weather and know where you're located, and I can get that, and I can get your medical information through a third party, all of which if you give me permission. But
right.
And the more you give me, the more detailed the story can become.
Yeah, I want to go quickly to that because all of a sudden I'm thinking about, Tim Berners-Lee current project, he calls it SOLID. It's this notion of, I don't know, I haven't gone to school on it entirely, but it's basically, it sounds like it would be a great foundation for what you're doing. This idea of like your personal social profile and information and your sort of permission giving to let people have that.
Correct.
How are you doing that? Until that exists, how do you do that now? How do you get that consent and permission to...
You literally ask them.
Okay.
And,
it's part of the conversation?
It's part of the conversation.
Okay.
And then you can say, and here's a page where you can decide what you want turned on or off. So you basically let them. Now, what it starts with, in many cases, it's starting with an employer is giving us an eligibility file saying our employees are going to participate, for example, in a health risk appraisal assessment. And so they're essentially giving us, and then we're going to reach out to them. They're going to then choose to sign up, but it's only eligible for these employees. Let's say you're at Acme Plumbing, and then they sign up, and then we start that process, and then we say, is it okay for us to get this information? And in fact, some employers will insist on that sort of thing, that they will not share data like with the insurance, from the insurance files, without the individual's permission. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just the more you give me, the more I can do.
Yep.
Doesn't mean I can't. And even with just the information I ask you, I can do a lot. So even if you give me no access to third-party data at all, I can do a lot. You can, most people answer most questions. They don't tend to tell you how much they earn. They don't necessarily want to give you their exact address or a phone number, and I don't blame them for that. But you can ask all kinds of questions and you can actually make inferences. It's like asking people, if you could only be hot or you could only be cold, which would you prefer? Well, okay, and we ask that. We actually do ask that question. Different types of people tend to answer those questions differently, so you can then make some guesses. Hence, now the machine learning kicks in as you start having lots of people. Did cold people respond, and did they have a different pattern than hot people? Those are there's, and we're just at the beginning.
And you have nice, tidy permission and privacy protection in place
Correct.
for all this stuff you got. That's great.
And we're just at the beginning. I think we're doing way cool stuff, and we are the one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind, and in healthcare, we're pretty damn blind in terms of communicating with consumers. So I don't want to present as, I think some people think that we now have a system that creates all the content. Well, you still need really good writers to then say, based upon all this contextual stuff, how am I going to create those Mad Libs that will be compelling? It's not like we're Data in Star Trek where data just creates the content. You still need that. Mm-hmm. And preferably you structuring that content where you have a deep understanding of whether it's the health belief model or stages of readiness, trans-theoretical model, or some mixture of that. So I need to understand those things so that as I structure that conversation, that story, that it's built around efficacy, it's built around readiness, it's built around an initial staging of meaning for you, and then I have to create cool content. So it still takes all three: technology, content, writers, and behavior change to make it all sing. And so we're still at the very beginning of this process, but I think it is a fundamental paradigm shift from, instead of saying I'm pushing information, to I'm creating a conversation and a relationship, and that over time I will get to know you such that what you need today is not what you need tomorrow, mm-hmm. and that you may not be ready to exercise now, but 6 months from now you might be. Your life circumstances have changed. And I think maybe that's the important part. Mm-hmm. It's about people's lives. It's not about health. It's about people. We're starting with people their life circumstances, their life interests, and then our job is to contextualize health within the context of their life.
And that history becomes part of the story. You know,
Correct.
it's going forward. Yeah.
Correct.
Boy, I could talk to you all day, Neal, but I like to keep the episode near a half hour, and I'm fine going a little bit over with this, but I want to give you an opportunity. I always do this toward the end of the episode. Anything that we haven't talked about or I haven't brought up that you would like to share with my viewers, my listeners?
Two things. One, and I think I just said it in a way, always start with people. People are not diseases. People are not risks. They are not claims. They are people. And it's so critical to start there as opposed to saying, here's somebody who is a diabetic and we need to do something to them. As opposed to, here's a person that's a very rich and interesting human. One of the things about them is they have diabetes, but there's a bunch of other things about them too. And that if you understand that and you start from that perspective, how you create content and services is very, very different. So I'd say that, and so you can do that both in terms of products we're creating, kind of like that health assessment, but you can also put this inside of any intervention you're already doing. There's nothing that prevents you from saying, let's say I am a diabetes education program, or I am a sleep program, or I am all this kind of stuff can be embedded inside what you're already doing. So it's not like you're either in this business or out. This is an engagement capability that should be embedded into what we do. It should be a different way of thinking about the nature of how we relate to our customers and consumers.
Well, thanks so much, Neal. This has been great.
My pleasure. It's fun.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed Neal's insights about how to build relationships with content-based conversations. In the next episode, we'll take another look at artificial intelligence. I'll talk with Crystal Taggart. Crystal is the founder of Elless AI, a marketing analytics platform that helps small to medium-sized businesses use AI and analytics to improve their marketing and customer experience. As always, I really appreciate it if you can leave your rating or review of this show at iTunes or your favorite podcast store.
Thank you for listening. If you can think of a friend who might enjoy this episode, please share it with them. And please join us again for our next content strategy interview.